So, you played some Space Marine 2, didn't you? Maybe you watched the Astartes animation, or perhaps you watched some lore videos or tried out some of the other video games, and now you want the little plastic guys. Well, I've been there, done that, and I'm going to help you do it right, do it affordably, and do it in a way that'll be fun. In this video, we're going to go through picking your tabletop army, what and where you should buy, what to do once you have the models, and some other general tips that'll make your experience getting into Warhammer 40k a lot better. And don't worry, JBat fans, JBats, I don't know, I guess we need a name for you guys. Anyway, current subscribers, you've seen these models on my desk now for a while, so this video is probably not a surprise. Don't worry, I'm not becoming a 40k channel now. More writing and world building stuff is coming soon. I just wanted to expand our horizons a little. And with that out of the way, this video should apply well to you if you're doing any of the Games Workshop tabletop games, or even most tabletop games built around plastic miniatures. Most of this advice will be pretty universal, but my focus here will still be on Warhammer 40k. So, when you're getting into this hobby, there is a lot to consider. If you're set on doing it, there are two things you're going to need, no matter what. Some super glue and some cutters. Both come cheap and in many varieties, and you don't need name brand to do well. Whatever you have locally should be fine as long as it's made pretty decently. But what is the first step of starting Warhammer 40k? That'd be step 1, choose your faction. If you count all the different flavors of Space Marines as separate, there are 32 factions in the game. That's a hell of a lot, and if you're going to be spending a good chunk of change in this game, which you will, but I'll try and help you spend a bit less than most people do, you want to make sure you pick the one that's right for you. The number one rule when it comes to picking a faction, or even what units you want to get for that faction, is pick what you think is cool. Never ever pick for rules. Not once. Never ever. Because rules change, and by the time you buy something that's good in the game, build it, paint it, and get enough other stuff to actually play a match, that super meta unit right now, it's gonna suck. So don't do it. Buy whatever it is that you like, what you think is cool. Now, you might have some opinions about who you want to start with already from your other exposures to 40k. Maybe you played Space Marine 2 and you want Marines, Tyranids, or Thousand Sons because they feature in the game. Maybe you read The Infinite and the Divine and you want Necrons. That's great. Stick with that and skip to the next chapter of this video if that's you. If you're not decided, then here's what I recommend. Go to the Games Workshop website, go to 40k, and just look around at all the models. Pro tip, do not buy from this website. This is the most expensive place any of these models are sold, and the shipping, while free if you spend a certain amount, does tend to take quite a while to arrive. There are better alternatives. However, this website is great because it shows you everything that's available for your faction with lots of high quality pictures. Pro tip 2 is that if a model on here says online only, be a little wary. While this isn't always the case, this can mean that the model will soon go out of production, and you don't want to be buying a model that might be dropped from the rules in only a couple years, do you? Pro tip 3. If a model looks a little different from the others in its range in terms of scale or design, it may be made of resin or metal rather than the standard plastic. You do not want this. These materials are far more difficult to deal with. You can always check by reading the model's description at the bottom of their page, so don't worry, it isn't a guessing game. But if you want a quick demonstration, this guy right here, this guy is resin. You see how easily this wobbles? Yeah, you don't want that. It's not good. Try and avoid it. So with that intro out of the way, I'll save you a little time and do some rapid fire on every faction in 40k. Category 1, Marines. Black Templars, they're crusading knight space marines, melee focus, no magic, lots of fire and swords. Blood Angels, noble vampire space marines, they like blood, get crazy and do a lot of melee, magic, and jetpacks. Dark Angels, the best marines, secretive Arthurian knights, cowls and robes. Specialized units, powerful ancient technology, and excellent elite troops. Death Watch. Alien hunters drawn from every Space Marine group clad in black armor. Units of mixed soldiers of all sorts of different types. Grey Knights, top secret demon hunters. Everybody does magic and they teleport across the battlefield. Imperial Fists, stubborn defenders, implaceable in the defense and love their bolt guns. Iron Hands. These guys love technology so much that they replace their arms with cybernetics, great shooting, and excellent vehicles. Raven Guard, stealth, Edgar Allan Poe memes, and speedy, tricksy gameplay. Salamanders, friendly guys with flamethrowers. They also like forging things and hitting things with big hammers. Space wolves. Vikings who really like wolves and alcohol. Lots of special characters and a focus on their hero units. Ultramarines. The standard Marines. Roman aesthetic, well-rounded. They're fairly reasonable people by 40k standards. White Scars. Mongolian biker gang. Speed is their first, middle, and last name. Category 2. Imperial armies. Adepta Sororitas. Gun nuns who love the god emperor so much that he smites their enemies for them. Elaborate and absolutely gorgeous unit design. Adeptus Custodes, super hyper omega elite guardians of the emperor. Low in number, high in skill and gold content. Adeptus Mechanicus, the phrase tech priest says it all. They worship technology and make it too, so they have all the coolest toys. Agents of the Imperium, specialized groups of the Imperial Inquisition. They are new and not quite fully developed. Astra Militarum, Cadia stands. The standard soldiers of the Imperium who fight 90% of the battles and get 10% of the credit. Big tanks, artillery, and masses of infantry. Imperial Knights. Gothic Gundam. Big walkers that either blow shit up or beat it to death with their massive fists. Category 3, Chaos Armies. Chaos Demons. Hellspawn from the Warp. There are 4 flavors and they all want to kill you in the name of their dark god. Very melee based and can also be used in the fantasy Warhammer games. Chaos Knights. Gothic Gundam, but evil. That's pretty much it. Pick them over Imperial Knights if you like spikes and demons. Chaos Space Marines. The Dark Brothers of the Imperial Space Marines. They rely more on melee and demon machine hybrids than guns and tanks, alongside hordes of raving lunatics. Death Guard. Entropy incarnate and diseased enough to give you typhus just by looking at them. Durable, slow, and great at debuffing their enemy until they can barely fight back. Thousand Suns. The best shooting army in Chaos and excellent at casting spells that completely ruin your opponent's plans. World Eaters. You have an axe and 2 legs. Run with the legs, hit target with axe until it stops moving, job done, blood for the blood god. Last category, Xenos armies. Eldari, space elves whose civilization is dying. They're fast, shoot and cast spells well, but are not super durable. They also live on planet-sized spaceships. Drukhari, space dark elves who really like torture, even faster than Eldari but even less durable. Gene Stealer cults. Alien hybrids who use Viet Cong tactics to beat armies that outclass them in every other way. Super unique playstyle. Leagues of Votan. Rock and Stone. Space dwarves, durable, slow, good shooting, and they get stronger the madder they are. Necrons, cyborgs from a time millions of years past. Made of metal that regenerates itself, and they have access to the best technology in the galaxy. Orcs, British football hooligans who slap their equipment together with duct tape and a prayer to Gork and Mork. Bad at shooting, but they have a lot of it, and they're great at melee. They got a very fun, ramshackle vibe. Tau Empire, the best shooting army in the game. They have lots of mech suits and powerful technology alongside all sorts of alien allies. Tyranids, the all-consuming swarm of xenomorphs on steroids. If any Xenos faction will take over the galaxy, it is them. Known for massive hordes and big monsters. And that's all of them. Don't be afraid to take some time choosing. Do some research on their lore and how they play so you can make a well-informed decision. That takes us to Step 2, ready to buy. So you know what faction you want and you're ready to drop some cash. I'll stop you real quick to offer one thing you can do if you're still reasonably hesitant. If you have access to a half-functional computer, there's a game called Tabletop Simulator that will, with some setup, allow you to play 40k on it. It doesn't compare at all to the feel of the real game, but can at least help you figure out if you like the rules of the game and your chosen faction. Anyway, here's where a lot of scattered recommendations come in. My first one is, if possible, get into the hobby with a friend. My oldest friend and I got into the hobby 4 years ago when we bought the introductory set for the second most recent edition of the game, and both of us having it helped motivate us to actually build and paint our models. Then, of course, we could play against each other. If this isn't possible, I would then recommend seeing if you have a local gaming store near you. If you do, try and ask the people working there when people play 40k and sit in to watch a few games. Meet some of the people, introduce yourself, and ask them for some advice. Local game stores will also generally have discounts, and alongside supporting a local business, are a great candidate for buying your stuff at a decent price. Amazon also tends to have decent prices for Warhammer models, as does Frontline Gaming if you live in the US. The latter also has a big secondhand market for miniatures, as does eBay, so those are also places worth looking if you're on a budget. So what is it you actually should buy? Well, your life is a lot easier right now if you want Space Marines of any flavor Flavor or Tyranids, as they were in the most recent starter set. Search around on Amazon or eBay for the Leviathan box or any of the 10th edition starter sets and you'll have an excellent intro right then and there. Otherwise, I'd recommend hunting around for a Combat Patrol box, as they are called, for your chosen faction. These tend to give you just enough models to be playable in the main game and even support their own mini rule set for any given Combat Patrol box to be played against the others. A pro tip on Combat Patrol boxes is that if you are playing, say, Blood Angels Space Marines, you can still buy the Dark Angels Combat Patrol, as most Space Marine models are interchangeable and only one chapter or another based on how you paint them. The next option can be a little controversial depending on who you ask, but 3D printing is also an option. I'm not the guy to ask about this, but my editor, who is also into the hobby, has a 3D printer, so I've had some experiences with the process. My general opinion is that in the long run it'll save you money, but there are decent startup costs, a lot of skills you need to learn, and the resin you print with is not as easy to work with as the official plastic models. Overall, you exchange spending more time and less money. However, for anything more than that, I will just have Yamez put in their thoughts here. With that out of the way, we can now move on to step 3. I have models, now what? So, you've gone and bought some models and now you want to make them look cool rather than like these sheets of plastic you pulled out of the box. Well, this is where your pliers and super glue go into effect. I find building to be fairly simple and very fun, but I do have some tips for it. 1. Check the rules for the unit you bought. If you want to spend money, you can use the official Warhammer app, but if you don't, there is a nice website called Wahapedia. Look it up, pull up the unit you're building, and check out some of the rules for the unit you've built. Even if you don't understand them exactly, it can give you an idea for what you might want your unit to be built with. Otherwise, just build for what looks cool and work it out later. 2. Take it slow the first time. Cut out the pieces you need and dry fit them before applying super glue. This is to say, take the two pieces and fit them together so you understand how they connect, and then apply super glue. This will significantly reduce any errors you might make. In cursive big oops, a twisting motion will most effectively break off superglue. Be very careful, as you can break the model if you do it with too much force, but twisting motion is the way to go to break superglue. Number 4, have fun. Even when you're building, you will probably start getting the appeal. The coolest thing about Warhammer is playing games with models you put effort into creating, from putting them together to painting them. These are your guys now. Embrace it. So you've got your models built, now comes the spooky step. Painting. I will warn you, this is the most time-consuming part of the process and your early results may not be pretty, but as with all creative things, you have to suck a little before you get good. But that suck will make the getting good feel so much better. I mean, this is what my first models looked like, but that's because I didn't seek out advice. And either way, hopefully my tips will help you suck less. So, tip 1 with painting is to decide your color scheme. You can stick with the official methods and, paint your Ultramarines blue, your Tyranids pink and purple, etc. But you can also do your own thing or paint for different sub-factions of your chosen army. Nobody cares, do what you want. Getting a scheme together is easy if you go with the official schemes, as just looking up the scheme will quickly lead you to results about what paints were used, but it can get a little trickier if you're doing your own thing. That's why we're going to go through JBat's mostly decent paint tips. These are mostly going to apply if you buy Citadel paints, but hold pretty true with other paint brands. So the first thing is the actual Citadel paint types. When you buy Citadel paints, it'll have a little category beneath the paint name. These are important. The first is base. This is normal paint. It is thicker and should be thinned, but will work exactly how you think it is. Layer is next, and it's like base, but tends to be thinner and used for highlighting, which we'll talk about a bit later. Then there is shade. This is a watery paint that sinks into recesses and adds depth. Nuln oil is the most popular of these and can be applied to everything, and new painters like it so much it has earned the name Skill Juice because it makes your models look good for basically no effort. The last 4 types are the most different. There is dry, which is for dry brushing, air, which is for air brushing, and those are pretty self-explanatory. Then there is technical. When you see technical, that means look up what this specific paint does, as they are all different. And it is basically the miscellaneous category. Some are meant to look like blood effects, others make mud or snow or sludge or what have you. Just make sure you look up what that specific one is for before you buy it. Last, and the newest, is contrast. Contrast looks like normal paint, it isn't. And I will explain how that is after the mostly decent tips. Number 2, white paint always sucks. Always. Keep this in mind for later. Number 3, a lot of black, orange, and yellow paint also sucks, but not as much as white does. Number 4, a bad paint job is infinitely better than no paint job. Number 5, even if you think you will or do suck, you can learn. I have shaky hands, but with the right technique, I learned to hold steady. Prop up your elbows and touch the fingers that aren't painting or holding the model to each other. I don't know why, but it works very well to stabilize yourself. That'll cover it for JBet's mostly decent painting tips. But before you put any paint on a model, you have one more thing you want to do. That is, prime your model. This is to say, give it a base layer of paint that will stick to the plastic. It's a crucial step. Do not skip it. There are a fair few ways to prime models, but I've had a lot of success with spray can or aerosol primers. With these, you can spray your model with one solid color, then paint over it. Pro tip 1 for this is make sure you test it first. Spray a Coke can or a plastic bottle or something other that isn't important before spraying it on a model. It's pretty rare, but something can be messed up, and you don't want messed up paint going on your expensive miniature. Also, shake thoroughly and spray in temperate conditions if possible. As far as brands go, Army Painter is good for this, and even something not meant for models like Krylon can do well in a pinch. The real concern here is, what color do I prime? This is actually part of a bigger question. Step 4. How do I paint my models? Alright, you have your army, models, scheme, and paints, and now you need a plan, and that can be scary. But it doesn't have to be. When you're starting out, I'd say there are two main methods. Method 1 is what I'll call the old-fashioned way. Method 2 is the contrast way. Remember how I mentioned contrast earlier? This is where it'll come in. But first, the old-fashioned way. This way, when brought to its conclusion, will produce minis that look like this. Highlighting and clean paint jobs is what makes this method work. This, I would say, is the lower skill floor and higher skill ceiling method. You can get something decent out of this with basically no effort, and excellent stuff with a fair amount of effort and skill. With this method, you want to prime your model in whatever color it's mostly going to be when it's done. With my Dark Angels, I paint them green, because that gets more than 2/3 of the painting done immediately. And then I only have to worry about the smaller stuff. The only exception to this rule is if your model will be anywhere near 1/3 or more white. If it will be, prime white. This is because white primer sucks a lot less than white paint. Even if your model will only be something like a quarter white, it might be worth priming it white anyway, as painting 3/4 of your model in colors that aren't white is way better than manually painting anywhere near 1/3 of your model white by hand. From here, you fill in details, go for an even finish, shade when done, and voila. Then, if you're feeling brave, you can highlight to really make the model pop. The nice thing about this method is that if you're afraid of highlighting at first, you can leave your models without for a while, and they'll still look fine, and you can come around and highlight whenever you feel up to it, and that's pretty much it. Method 2 is the contrast method. The skill required to get results here is very low if you do it right, but maybe you can't carry it quite as far as the previous method at its peak. Here's what models painted in this method might look like. Either way, this is a good, valid way to paint. So the idea here is you use black and white primer. Spray the model black, then spray it white from an upward angle, and you naturally get shadows built into your model as you primed it from the same angles light will hit it at. From this point, manually paint the entire model with contrast paints plus metallics where you need them, and that's it. Just fill in the blanks. It's very simple, very accessible. It's just that first step you've got to do to make it work. From this point, we'll real quick hit basing and decals and then wrap it up. For basing, use a Citadel technical paint or check out Army Painter. They make nice materials for it. If you go with a basing material and not a paint, buy some PVC glue, spread it on your base with a toothpick or old brush, pour basing material on the base, and done. For decals, cut out the decal, dip it in water, set it aside. Paint some Citadel Storm Shield onto the surface you want the decal to go on, then use a brush to push the decal off the sheet and onto the model. Once it's in place and dry, put another layer of Storm Shield on it to secure it. With that, I think we've covered all the essentials. Warhammer 40k and most other tabletop war games are a hugely fulfilling use of time, and there's nothing like seeing your guys fight and win battles on the tabletop. Hopefully you've enjoyed, and please leave your feedback in the comments. Tell me what armies you have or might get, and tell me if you'd like any more 40k content in the future. Other than that, please consider liking and subscribing, and remember, once you start on the plastic crack, you can't stop.